Welcome to Not Psychologist Talks, where Jason, a psychologist by legacy, and Yurii, a psychologist by Ilker, community to community folks, are getting to openly talk about complex things and issues to remove that stigma and solve them together. Today we have our first guest is Chris Miles, a good friend of us from the community world. And after the previous episode with Jason, Chris just messaged me, "Hey Yurii, I watched this last episode. I loved it. I have few interesting stories to share and I will be willing to have a conversation about it." And some of the topics are surviving childhood trauma, living with a disability in a normal society, learning to manage emotions, or saying no to suicide. So here we are, and today Chris is going to share his story. So welcome, Chris.
Yeah, welcome,
Yay.
Chris. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you for being our first guest.
Yes, I am your first. I love that. You will never take that away from me.
That's right. You'll always be our first. I wanted to kind of before we jump in, just say like to Yuri's point when we got the reaction to the episode, the last episode where I did that kind of double episode of telling the story about my father's passing and during COVID and everything. And if you haven't had a chance, please go back and watch it. If I do say so myself, I don't know. It's kind of weird to promote your own story, but anyway, it was real interesting, Yurii, the reaction that we got, because some of it was public, which was really great, and thank you for the public support. So much of it was private and people like pinging us in DMs, whether it was you, Yurii, or me. I even talked to someone at a conference about it, and I think more people watched it and felt something from it than I was expecting. But the reaction is really what got me because, and I'll say this as a public service announcement, if it resonated with you, if it meant something to you, I highly encourage you to share publicly, because the whole point of this is to break down that stigma. And if as many of us can comment publicly, perhaps someone reading it will be like, yeah, it resonated with me too, or I had this experience, or like what Chris did, reached out to us and said, I want to be on the show and tell my story. Even better. That's exactly where we're going for. So that was just my little like PSA. Plus, Elmo's checking in and wants to know how you all are doing.
So just like that, one more thing to remember, that it's not psychologist talk.
That's
So
right.
if you really need help, please go see specialists. And here we are sharing like real life stories and helping each other like on the human level. So yeah, Chris, let's go to you and share with us everything. As you said, no limits. So let's do it.
I get the feeling I might live to regret that statement. But
You never know. You never know. Like, but yeah. So
my first trauma only really came to light when I was 14. So a family member of mine who my mother had entrusted with my safety ended up abusing me as a child. And it wasn't just like a one-time thing or anything. It was systemic for 8 years. So like from when I was 6 to when I was 14. And that had a big impact on me, obviously. It led to depression. It led to suicide attempts. Like, it was a horrible, horrible place to be. But that was kind of compounded by not being seen as a normal child because I lived with autism and ADHD. And so it was just like this horrible cesspool of hate that was like focused inwardly. It had a huge impact on my family as well, because like, I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to. My mother's a very, very protective person because of her upbringing. And she's always wanted to provide us with like a really loving, open environment where we feel supported in whatever we're doing. She's like that even now, and I love it. It's great. And so she was driving around with a knife in a car just in case she saw the perpetrator, because like she would have done it and I'd have not seen her for like the last 10 years, and for maybe the next 40, who knows. It had a huge impact on the family. And so I ended up trying to commit suicide numerous times. I call this the Great Depression. From when I was 19 to 24, I kind of lost those years of my life. But then I found game development, but that's a different story for a different talk.
Well, I think it's important to understand how well, I guess we should start at the beginning, and I would love to know how you got out of the depression, because I think having been through depression, it's a you feel like it's like a tunnel, right? You're just going down though, but it's really hard to get back up. And I'd like to hear stories about how people kind of conquered their depression. I don't know if you ever really truly conquer your depression, but how do you get out of it? How did you get out of that?
Well, firstly, I agree. You never get over depression. There's always something in your mind that sort of tries to drag you down. And managing it is tricky sometimes, especially if like you've got other stuff going on and whatnot, and you're stressed. But in terms of getting out, I think my core value growing up was I'm not enough. So every decision I made, even up until 4 years ago, no, 2 years ago, that was still my core value. So it spanned 20. How old am I now? I know I'm too old when I have to think, I have to count. So 33 now. So for 25 years, that was my core belief. I'm not enough. Everything I do must improve my self-worth. So getting out of it was a case of feeling supported by my family, which is exceptionally easy for them. Because I am so great. No, I'm kidding. But with that core value in mind, I have a very logical brain. Like, if problem exists, here are 6 different solutions to fix it. So I don't like the way I look, get a haircut, feel good. I don't like the fact that I don't have a career, and this is me playing me at 25. I've got a career. It's been 7 years since I stopped working. Like, what am I going to do? Like, okay, here's what I need to do. Here's what I enjoy. Let's kind of breaking down each problem into its component parts and kind of working through the lists one after the other. I hate the fact that I'm gay because society doesn't accept me. Fix for that. Just don't give a fuck. Everyone else has their opinion, and that's their opinion. Easy. But in reality, it isn't easy at all. You just kind of have to work through your own emotions and stuff. I'm sorry, the train has gone to a different station. I think getting out of depression was single-handedly the hardest thing I've ever done. I was at a point where I didn't have money because my ASD and ADHD meant that I can't attend appointments without significant assistance at the time. I didn't eat because I literally didn't feel hungry. I was constantly dehydrated because that same hunger transferred over to thirst. So it was like everything was a mess. Everything was at bottom. Nothing worked. I wasn't a functional human being. I just sort of existed in that moment. So it was, again, problem. Don't drink. Right. Bottle of drink at hand 24/7. Got you. Don't eat. Stick a calendar alert in. Okay, now I have sustenance. I can function as a human. The emotional side of things was just feeling supported. My family did a truly, truly amazing job. And I 100% wouldn't be here today if they hadn't. I can guarantee that. Someone always being on watch, checking in every hour, what you're up to. Oh, have you seen this cool thing that I think you might find interesting? Just sort of trying to pull me back in. from it, and internally being, I don't know. You probably face this, Jason, where you're like, what's the point? Why are we?
I was just quickly looking up numbers because sometimes numbers help, and I was actually surprised. I thought that the numbers for people suffering from depression reported would be much higher. I think people lie. I think people lie. Uh, and honestly, it's hard to know if you're in depression. Would you know? I think that's the other piece. Like, at least for me, I didn't know. It's like later you're like, oh, that was depression or something like that. At least for me, yeah, it was space. When I went through my deepest depression, it actually was my father was still alive. It actually wasn't related to that at all. Um, and actually, what you said, providing the person space to be not okay, actually helped significantly. Um, and I would recommend that people get the support that they need through therapy. But that said, if that's not necessarily like, again, like you don't always know you're in depression, I think it's just talking to people. Like telling people you're not okay is okay. And I think that's the biggest hurdle sometimes. Find the people. Yuri, I see you're shaking your head and maybe, yeah,
It'll,
I would love to hear why.
it'll be the next episode, like telling people about that you're not okay, because it's something that I'm definitely struggling with. I can say to very, very close circle of people that I'm not feeling okay. And I remember it was one of the Between Two Water Coolers meetups where I'm always kind of like smiling, happy, hey, let's do it, hoo-hoo. But then it was like one of the days it was like, yeah, totally devastating. I was like, yeah, folks, I'm not happy today. So let's just go to the rooms and let's just talk. And I don't remember, but I feel like either I was on my own that time, or I had a conversation with people and they were super supportive. But yeah, I feel like it's totally another conversation. And Chris, I'm curious, since you have such a logical mind, so what did you try to fix with suicide attempts?
Me. It sounds a little absurd, but I am a completely different person. I have the opposite personality to what I had when I went in depression. Like Jason mentioned, understanding that you have depression in the first place is a difficult task. And so I ended up turning into somebody that like checked in on myself every day and like, how am I feeling? What am I worried about? What's something that's scaring the crap out of me? Like, what am I anxious about? Is that even real? Like, just focusing on those sorts of things and identifying behaviors that I exhibited. So like a common symptom, a common trait with Asperger's or autism spectrum disorder is not having an executive filter. So like if somebody says something crude, you'd be like, haha, penis, because it's just the first thing that pops into your head. So developing an understanding of how that would work, and then finding a way to do it. Now, I can't be specific. I don't know the steps that I took to develop that, other than having a lifetime of, I did this thing, it was terrible, and people hated me for it. Like I remember one of my old best friends, his mother had a intestinal disease that meant she looked pregnant all the time. And I just said, she was like 56. And I just asked her one day when she was due, because I was a kid, I didn't know any better. And there wasn't that thought of consciousness, like, wait, maybe she's not pregnant. Maybe she's ill or something. And that just come out. So I've got like a big history, a big list of experiences where I'm like, okay, that's bad. I don't know which station we're at here. Sorry. What can you do me a favour? Can you delete the floundering and then re-ask me the question, and then we'll take it from there again?
I didn't think you were floundering. Like, this is hard. It's hard to talk about the state you're in when you are contemplating suicide, because it's not a rational state. Like Yurii said, you're a rational person, and you are, like, from all the times we've ever talked, like I've always gotten that impression. But the problem with depression and suicide is that you're not in a rational state. And so it's very hard to explain the unexplainable. And I think that's the other piece that you probably went through, was trying to, like, what's going on here? Who am I? I don't even know myself anymore. Like, you continue to question, and even in that state you go down. And that's why that like I kind of described a tunnel feeling, like you're in that literal downward spiral when you get to that point. And did that help, Chris? I don't know if that's at least from my own experiences.
I definitely agree. There's a risk of cyclic thinking where you're like, oh, this thing I did was bad. I'm a bad person. Look at all these bad things I did. They make me a bad person, etc. And that's like a really difficult thing to break free from. So when you're depressed, oh, I don't want to eat. What's the point? And then you don't have the energy to eat because you're too tired. Like, identifying those problems while you're in an irrational space is really difficult. It's really, really hard. I completely understand how that sort of stuff affects people because I've lived it. And I think, to be fair, I think that's why I'm the way I am now, because I've gotten through that stage of grief and self-loathing and just thinking, what's the point? And then I've seen moments from my family and my friends and just random people on the street. It's okay. It's totally okay not to be okay. Tell me, let me help you. And then you end up in a position where you have that experience. You can empathize with people who have gone through that experience, and you can help them by sharing your story. Hence, we're here.
That's why we do this. That's why we do this. Yeah. And that story I was telling, when we were, like, just trying to compare it, not compare, but just kind of relate it. When I was in that state, my dad drove 3 hours to come I was in college, come visit me, and literally just took me out for a steak lunch, and just let me talk, let me share. And I always go back to, I think that possibly saved my life. I think that was a big point for me, and I'm sure you probably had that moment that you can recall turned some things around for you.
Absolutely. I remember one of my suicide days, let's call them that. It started out with me just completely crumbling on the sofa. There was like a circular sofa, and I was just sort of fetal position in there, just crying my eyes out, like, oh, I don't know what to do. What's the point of life, etc. And then my mum just herself and then just rested me on her. And I just remember crying and crying and crying. And then, like, 2 hours had passed, 3 hours had passed, and she hadn't moved. And, like, I composed myself a little and was like, you all right, mate? Because she'd given me that space, she'd given me that safety to just get myself together. And that, I think that's one of the moments, which I think, funnily enough, it was before I sent her a text message that night saying thank you for everything. So, like, it did something, but it was, that one moment wasn't enough to change the decision that I'd made in that moment. I don't know.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah. And I'm sorry that you went through what you went through, and it's I think a lot of people unfortunately uh have experienced that, and then there's obviously a lot who haven't, but um you we've certainly heard more people coming forward, and I think it's because people are more willing to share these experiences, and I think that's a net good that is happening, so that people can hear this and say, look, because maybe they're at that point you were at, and it's like, maybe I can turn it around. Look, Chris seems okay. Chris seems to be doing okay. Chris, are you okay today?
Yes, I love it. I love life. It's great.
Yeah,
And
how powerful is that?
Oh yeah, it's coming from that place and then just going, what an idiot! Look at him. To myself, by the way, looking at how far I've come is crazy, and knowing that none of this was possible is even crazy to think. Like, if I hadn't had those moments with my mum and other moments, I would be here.
you know, it's interesting. I'm listening to your story, Chris, and to your story with Jason when Dad took you out of just for a steak, and I went just through my mind, like as far as I remember myself, and I don't remember ever talking to any of my parents. I don't remember ever talking to any of my friends, like real this deep talks, when you like go into some uncharted territory and you are really sharing something that on your mind, because it's like everything is all about usually about the weather, about some stuff like what are your grades at school, etc. And it's fun, but uh, it was just a month ago or something like that. I I feel like one of the first conversations I really had. We were just talking with my wife about some stuff, and she was sharing with me some practices about how you can find your inner child and kind of like talk to yourself as a kid and see like what is your kid struggling with, and most likely what do you feel this kid struggling with most likely is what you really feeling inside. And I feel like it was the first time I was really, really talking about stuff. And the fun thing that when I shared how this kid feels, which kind of like how do I feel, I cried. And she was like, "Oh yeah, it's okay," like, and I was like, "What the hell? What the shit is going on?" Like, I don't want to cry, but I was just crying, and you know, only now I'm starting to understand the real importance of this conversation. And definitely like good part of that are doing psychologists for sure. That's why you'll go to therapy, etc. But I feel like it's also about having just a good friend, and it doesn't mean that it has to be a person like from your school or whatever, like from colleague. It may be your parents, it may be your children, I don't know, but just a good friend who kind of like can listen and without this judgment. And I feel like, Chris, you had this friend in your mom. So and I'm still thinking like, so you told that you were having this kind of like suicide period from 19 to 24. So what helped you to go over? What helped you to stop this period? Like, what changed your mind? How did you feel that, okay, I'm not doing it?
I found game development by accident. I'd gotten to a place where I was okay with existing. Existing is fine, I guess, sort of thing. And then I accidentally discovered game development, and I was like, wow, this is fucking cool. What if, like, I had an idea and then, like, I could do some big boot programming type things, and then, like, the thing exists. Like, it didn't exist 5 minutes ago, but then I did the thing and now it exists. That's actually really, really cool. And that sort of gave me something to work towards. Like, programming such a vast space, So there was tons of stuff to learn, and I've always been somebody that loves learning. So I'm like, yeah, but what's an array? What actually is an array? Is it like, and then like I theorize stuff, and then I'd be like, oh, this is a thing I can use. What's that thing? Okay, and then I sort of built my first game. It was terrible, but nobody had ever taught me how to do this thing. I'd done that myself, and so I was like, yeah, but what if I make Pokemon? Is that something I could do? And I just sort of try to replicate different kinds of game mechanics that I like, because I've known since I was 13 that I wanted to be a game developer, but I didn't know how. Like, where do you even begin? So I was making Pokemon, I was making farming games, I was making tower defense games, strategy games, and then before I knew it, like I was cool. I like life now because I have like a goal, I have a vision, I have a purpose. I don't know if that answers your question. I think it would.
I think it does, and I think it's something that Yurii, do you recall me saying like what my therapist shared with with death, like is finding the purpose in the trauma. I think that's huge. I think that's this show is literally the manifestation of that. And I totally agree, Chris. I think that's the way out. I was gonna give the numbers real quick because I had mentioned numbers and then I completely forgot to give the numbers. There you go. I think you'll be surprised by these numbers, actually, when it comes to depression worldwide, according to the WHO, the World Health Organization, about 280 million people worldwide, um, roughly 4% of the world's population, experience depression. I think those numbers are super low, and there's probably a lot of people who are just living with it and not really like understanding that they have it. And then suicide data, according to the World Health Organization, about 700,000 people a year commit suicide. And that's roughly one person every 40 seconds, which is insanely high, in my opinion. And I don't have I don't think we know suicide attempts. Um, but yeah, I would imagine that's significantly higher. So, I am kind of shocked by that first number. What do y'all think?
Oh, I'll let Yori go.
I was thinking about that. I feel like this number is people who admitted that they are going through depression. So who kind of understood this, who've been told about this, like what depression is, like went through some questions, talked to someone. Because like, I don't know, like there are so many unhappy people on the streets, when you're just having walk in the park or anywhere. I don't see a lot of people like smiling, they're and these grumpy faces and look, oh. So it's totally shitty numbers, like there are so much higher. And once again, I don't know how about you guys, but it's something that I've heard it's bad. Depression is bad. If you are depressed, you kind of like this bad person. That's something, Chris, you were talking about that, like you are doing bad things, and it's like it's not okay to have a depression. How can you have to enjoy your life, you have to be happy, you can't be depressed, like if you are depressed, you are wrong. So I feel like that's something that we have in our minds. And even if I would feel that I have a depression, I don't know if I would tell this.
Yeah, I think I want to clarify depression because I hear this sometimes. It's like you're not happy, or you're not laughing, or you're not smiling. That's not depression. Depression, like you said, Yurii, you also said it goes deeper. So depression, I'll give you an example of my own how I experience, because I can't talk about anything else other than my own. Depression is waking up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and completely missing the day. starting your day at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And depression is not taking a shower or something for days. Depression is completely isolating yourself. Depression is when you come from home from whatever it is, school, work, and you just sit in a chair and watch whatever bad, like movies or something for hours. That's depression. Chris, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I just wanted to say that I totally agree. Like, all those things you've described, I've done for years. But I think it's because some of those things I just enjoy. Like, when I finished, I experienced, I'll give you context. When I experienced this a lot 16-ish weeks ago when I got laid off from a job I loved with a community that I absolutely adored, with a project that I wholeheartedly believed in that just came out of nowhere. I genuinely felt like I was grieving the loss of a loved one. It was a crazy experience, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this can relate to that, at least to some degree. But I ended up not eating because I was depressed. Like, I got up whenever I wanted because I didn't. What am I going to get up for? Like, it was a lack of purpose in life. It was, okay, I guess I just got to sit with my feelings and process them. And then when I'm ready, I'll put a timeline on it. But when I'm ready and I feel like it, I'll just go do something, anything. And I sort of told myself that subconsciously. Like, I understand what's happening right now. I understand how it's going to affect me. I know the calling cards for how my depression affects me. So I'm just going to let it happen. It's okay. I don't have to shame myself that I feel this way. You know, I'd quit smoking for a year and 2 months. And when I got laid off, I'd started again. And I'm like, it's only temporary. Even now, I'm like, it's only temporary while I sort of collect myself together and like start working towards my goals, which I'm now finally doing, as you know. Depression. When you told me the stats, 280 million people have to class themselves as having depression. That's an insane number because obviously, like you both said, it's a bias. Like, those are the ones that'll admit it. What a horrible, horrible statistic. Like, that tells you that countries around the world are doing a terrible job at supporting their citizens. They're not getting the care that they provide. They're not getting the support from friends, family, loved ones, the government, the health systems when they should be. Like, 700,000 people a year commit suicide. That's fucking outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. That's 700,000 people a year that are being failed by the human race. And that makes me so mad because when you're sad, when you're depressed, when you've had enough, all you do is move your pain to everybody around you because they have to then grieve your loss. They have to pick up the pieces from where you left off. I can't. I'm just going to mute myself again.
You know,
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Go ahead, Yurii.
Something that I learned through another type of conversations, but talking to freelancers about their challenges, and people have pretty much the same challenges. There are so low amount of unique problems. Still, everyone thinks that they are unique. Oh, I was left away from my project, or oh, I can't go through this job interview. Oh, nobody wants to work with me. And people are like, oh, I'm unique. Other people are working because they go to LinkedIn, they go to social media to see how happy and successful people are. Because usually people are not sharing their shitty stories. Like it's all about like yeah, we're this glamorous, etc., and we are the best of the best of the best. But that's exactly what I understood, that just by hearing to someone else's story helps you feel so much better, and not in a way that their life is worse than me. No, not in this way. Sometimes it may be the case, who knows? But it's all about understanding that you're not unique, you're not alone. There are other people who are going through the same. So maybe it's not that really, really bad. Yeah, it's bad, but maybe there is still the way out of it. But I feel like it's you have to also have this shift in your mindset that, first of all, I can talk to people about this. And secondly, like I'm not unique. Every time that shit happens with me, I'm like, am I unique? Most likely no. And it's really helpful, to kind of proceed with those thoughts.
Yeah, 100%. And Chris, I'm with you. I was shocked by those numbers, and it is sad. It's really sad, because all those people who feel like they don't know, which is what I would imagine a lot of people still don't really know or have processed the fact that they're facing depression. And I would think that those who are feel an incredible amount of stigma where they can't self-report, and then they can't get help, and they stay stuck in this um, this lack of self-worth and purpose cycle, because it's never ending, especially when you feel like you can't get help, and that's the outcome. We know the outcome, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people end up turning to really harmful coping mechanisms because of that, like gambling, drugs, drink, and that sort of thing. But I completely understand why you would do that. I've not been in the same boat, but I used to smoke marijuana because it just dulled my senses, and I was like, just anything to get me through this day. Like, I completely understand that. But in the long term, it doesn't help you. It just helps you kind of put the feelings to one side for a short time. And I think if you exchange any terrible coping mechanisms for things that will actually benefit you, you're already on the way to just being a happier person. Even if it's just a very, very small step. I feel terrible, I'm going to do something for me. That puts you on the right track.
100%. And just imagine if people had that person who they could trust to talk to. Sometimes it just takes that. Sometimes it's just that. And that's the crazy piece of it all, is that sometimes it's just being comfortable enough to find that one person. I want to go back to your experiences. And how old were you when you said you were you were 6 when it started? Wow. Okay. So you're 6 years old. And when did you realize that what was happening to you wasn't right?
When I was 13,
13.
I was like, wait a minute. Like, I was confused. I still am, apparently. I was confused about the whole thing because I'd sort of been indoctrinated into believing that was normal rational behavior.
Sure.
And I have a few friends who have gone through similar experiences. So thankfully on that front, I can chat about those specifics or whatever. But I think being 13, realizing that was abnormal, and then not knowing what to do with that information was the hardest part. Because I'm a kid. If I tell somebody, I'll get in trouble and it'll be my fault. And then I'll be upset at myself that I got myself in trouble when it could all have been avoided. It's really complex.
It's really complex. And as a parent now, it's like this is the stuff you think about when you're trusting people. And the truth is, you trust everyone to an extent, but I think you always have to maintain a healthy lack of trust too. Don't just willy-nilly be okay with your kids going anywhere, and believe them when they tell you stuff. Who was the first person you told? Was it your mother?
I don't actually know. I don't remember that. I'd assume it's my mother. Oh, I'm going to say it's my mother, but that's not the truth because I want to protect somebody else.
Okay, fair enough.
It's not for me to say. We had a conversation, and then because they had expressed that happened to them when they were on a night out, and I was like, "Shit, no way, me too." And then it just sort of came came crumbling down from that moment on.
Yeah. And there was a validation in what you experienced. And I think that when you're at that point where you're ready to tell, I think the validation is really what you're seeking.
Yeah.
Right. Because you're trying to explain it to yourself too. Right. So someone else saying, yeah, that sounds like, or that is huge for you, I would imagine, in the moment, because you don't know. You're still not 100% sure. Like you even said now, like it's still confusing.
It's weird because like you obviously you don't know what you don't know, and like trying to manage those feelings, like I'd get flashbacks. I still get them to this day occasionally, which is absurd to me because like I've been through it, I've processed it, but I still get moments where I'm like, oh shit. And I forgot what I was going to say. Dealing with it when you're growing up, thinking it's normal, realizing it's not normal, not knowing what to do with it. So I'd spent 4 years knowing it was not okay, not knowing who to tell, trying to hint to my mum subtly that I don't want to go to this person's house anymore, not being able to tell them why, and then blaming yourself because it's still happening and it's your fault and you can stop it. Like there's just so much stuff to deal with that you're not conscious of at the time, that it's only upon looking back you can sort of judge it properly.
I'm curious, what did your mother tell you when you told that I don't want to go there?
You'll be fine. Come on. My mum had a real hard time with me. I was diagnosed with ADHD at age 6. That was all it. That's all the diagnosis that I had at the time. And I would not. I had anger management problems. I couldn't communicate correctly. So like, I'm hungry, give me food. I'd be like, ugh, for no apparent reason. Like I hated being excluded, but I didn't want to do a lot of the things that people were doing. And I got very violent. Like there were a couple of moments. I have very few memories as a child. I have a couple of really good ones. And then a lot of like, I'm stabbing my sister with a knife now, and I'm hitting them with baseball bats and whatever because I literally didn't have the capability of controlling my emotions. I've forgotten your question. I got so engrossed in the emotions there.
Yeah, but you already answered. It was about like, what did your mother tell you when you said that you don't want to go there? And
okay.
Yeah. So
yeah, sorry, if I could just elaborate. I got the context, didn't get the point. So she was in a really tough spot with me. She had 2 others to look after, 2 other dependents, and then she's a single parent, so she had literally no other choice. So it was just go and shut up sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, thank you so much for being, so open with us and sharing your story. And obviously our hope is that if you're listening, maybe you've experienced something similar, or face depression or suicidal thoughts or whatever it may be, and you're like, and you get some comfort from hearing other people who have gone through their own stuff as well, and that there is hope out there and it exists, and life is it's a long bumpy process. And right, it ebbs and flows, and I think as long as you hold on and you find that support, you'll manage your way through it. It's not always easy, and I would never pretend that it is, but there's support out there for you, and anyone who is having thoughts like that or suicidal thoughts or struggling, we urge you to once you're done listening, shut this off and immediately contact someone, because we're obviously not real therapists, nor would we ever claim to be. So we really recommend seeking someone to talk to professionally.
And just one super small but very important for me personal question, that when you described your current state, Chris, when you were fired, you told that you are kind of going through, if I understood it correctly, kind of like controlled depression. So how do you control it?
First of all, you don't, but because I've gone through it numerous times and I manage it sometimes on a weekly basis, I know what signs to look for. So even though because I have that self-worth that I've acquired over the years, and I have an understanding, I'm a very introspective person. I can take stock and notice what behaviors I like and don't like, etc. Excuse me. Recognizing that you're not in a good place and then doing something about it, or just doing nothing and just mentally keeping track of it, is how you would kind of control it. I know we're short on time, but I want to add to Jason's point about urging people to seek help. Now, there is a really good film that's old now that I think everybody who's gone through trauma needs to watch, and that's called Good Will Hunting. Good Will Hunting, because there's a scene where Robin Williams tells the protagonist, I've forgotten his name, Matt Damon, that it's not his fault. He says, that thing that happened to you when you were a kid, it's not your fault. Now, even now, I know logically it's not my fault that those bad things happened. And probably in the listeners' experience, they know logically that thing that was bad isn't my fault. You can still feel like it's your fault. And that's okay. But until you get reassurance that it wasn't your fault, either from the source of the trauma or from a therapist, you will carry that forever.
Yeah.
Really, really well said, Chris. And thank you again for sharing openly and being part of the show and contributing to what we're trying to do here, which is sharing trauma and trying to get rid of this stigma that exists, because this stigma is quite literally killing people, and we don't want that to happen anymore.
Thank you for having me.
And for those who listen, please reach out to Chris for sure. Continue this conversation, and if you want to share your story, reach out to me or Jason, and let's share your story with the world. And let's make each other's lives better. Hopefully,
that's right. Share what you thought publicly. Reach out to us, and we would love to have you on the show.
See you in another episodes.